My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and this is 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the strategic choices that all of us can make in order to be fully alive. Today in the studio, I have my good friend Josh Venis, who is an endurance sports coach, and he's going to talk about mindset. He's going to talk about confidence. He's going to actually dig deep with us and actually help us realize that the most important thing about us is what comes into our mind. It's our belief system that actually fuels and shifts and changes and maximizes our behavior. He does this with athletes. I do this in the corporate world, and I think this will be a fascinating conversation to you regardless of where you are in the various seasons and stations of your life. Listen in. Well, Josh, as you reminded me, even off camera, that we have known each other for many, many years. I'd actually lost count, but it is probably true of most of the podcast guests that have been here in the 3 Word studio. It is likely that maybe we have known each other for many more years than most of my guests. And so I'm excited to have you in the studio for the very first time. I think we're going to have an incredible conversation about a topic that we both feel really strongly about and are passionate about. But first, this being your first time, nobody knows you. And so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I appreciate you having me on. My name is Josh Venis. I am a local resident in Bowling Green. And as you said, I've known you since I've been in my teenage years. When you first came to BG, I remember growing up, watching some of your kids grow up, and then all the different phases of your life and your accomplishments and your many things that you've done. So I am a endurance sports coach. I work a lot on some of the things we're going to talk about today. And I'm also a dad to 2 teenage daughters. And I really enjoy getting in and really talking about things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. And I think these 3 words we've agreed upon, we're both very passionate about. In fact, we've talked about the possibility of having you in the studio for a while now. And I think that when we landed on this topic, it was like, well, of course, we got to have Josh Venis in the room. So that said, here are our 3 words for today.
Master your mindset.
Now, as a life coach, as a consultant, I care a lot and I teach a lot around this topic of mindset. But now we're taking it next level in how to master that mindset. In fact, I work with professional and collegiate athletes. We talk a lot about mindset. As I work with corporate execs, we talk a lot about mindset. But you have a unique understanding and a unique kind of angle on this, being someone who trains in this, how to actually master it. Why is this topic so important to you?
Yeah, I think when I think about this topic of mastering your mindset, it's really about controlling your thoughts to create a positive outcome, or what I say, extraordinary outcome. Because in some cases we perform, but then sometimes we really break through and create that extraordinary performance. And that's where it really starts to come into really manifesting your future and really trying to really unlock potential within your performance. So when I think of these words and when I think about mastering something, I think, wow, I have to work at this for a really long time. I can't just do this one time and be great at it. I have to do it a lot of times. I have to practice it. I have to fail. I have to learn and grow along the way to be able to really work on mastery of something. So today, that's what I'm hoping to unpack a little bit.
Yeah. And mindset obviously is some of the work that you do, obviously personally, as you've competed, but now you train. Help us understand. So you train ultra marathoners, talk to us about that. Who do you train in mindset?
Yeah, so I'm an endurance sports coach. I'm an Ironman certified coach. So I work with endurance sports athletes that compete in running and triathlon, most specifically at the Ironman distance level, which could be the half iron or the full iron distance, as well as any level of triathlon, let's just say. But it's an endurance sport. It's a sport where you're putting swim, bike, and run together. It's a sport where you train as little as 6 to 8 hours a week, up to 15, 16, 18 hours a week. So if you can imagine packing all of that time of training into a busy week for most professionals, it's a lot of work.
So how much do you think in regards to, because obviously that's why I was even stuttering a little bit figuring this out, because I've never run a triathlon. I'm like, what's an ultra marathon or what's a I like to work out. I like to do those things. I've never done an endurance kind of adventure, but I'm guessing a lot of that is mental.
Absolutely.
And how much do you feel like it is in actually people seeing success in mindset versus physical endurance?
Yeah, that's 100% the biggest thing that I work on with my athletes is how do we approach the sport from a mental capacity? How do we approach the sport with our mindset to allow us to unlock our full potential? And what that really means is we have to get through the gap of failure. We have to get through the gap of we don't have to be perfect. We just need to continue to show up every day. We need to continue to practice. We need to continue to put ourselves in tough situations and try to come through that with adversity. And I always tell people, people that can really control and master their mindset are good at adapting and overcoming. So those are some key things that I think really help people unlock what they are doing as they're not only training, but then we go on race day and we go execute on the day, and we can come into that with a mindset that we know we are going to win. Quitting is not an option at that point. So that is really where we transcend the whole shift of we're not just completing, we're competing, right? And that really translates outside of just what I do, right? If you think about life, if you think about anyone else that does some kind of task or performance, right? You have to really come into that with positive vibes and good thoughts to allow you to unlock your potential. And on the other side of that, there's people that come in with a negative mindset, and quite often they fail. And so what I tell people is, I've actually really worked on this with an athlete specifically new to me. And I said, listen, this is a female athlete that I'm working with. I said, you have a lot of confidence issues, right? So what we are going to work on is whenever you have a negative thought, we're going to replace it with 2 positive thoughts, right? Because now the volume of positive thinking starts to outweigh the volume of negative thinking, right? So it's really shifting that mindset from the negative to the positive, and that's where the power comes.
Well, I'm not sure if you've listened to our one episode entitled Build Your Confidence, but we actually talk about the fact that confident is an acrostic, CONFIDENT, the 9 choices you can make in order to build your confidence, and right in the middle are 2 N's. Negative thoughts negative thoughts removed, and then negative thoughts replaced. It's interesting. We allow negative thoughts oftentimes to run unfiltered, uncensored, unchallenged in the apartment of our mind as though they belong there, as opposed to identifying them and saying, I'm not owning that, and actually replacing it with something. I love that you say replace it with 2 positives. I love that because, and again, I work with athletes as well at the collegiate and professional level as a life and performance coach. And I ask athletes regularly, and I'm not sure if you've ever had this conversation, Josh, with your athletes, but I will ask them regularly, what percentage of your game do you think is mental? And I've never had an athlete at any level say less than 50%. And then my follow-up question is, well, then you spend, they say 60% or 80%. So you spend 60 or 80% of your time doing mental training, right?
Absolutely.
And they look at you like, no, you would never, ever prepare for a triathlon or ultra marathon without doing physical training. And yet mentally, we think, we're just going to show up and hope for the best. We have to train in being able to master, as you said, over the period of time, your mindset. And I like how you're expanding it beyond athletics and beyond these ultra athletes, because it's what's true of the mom and the dad and the corporate exec and the nonprofit vice president. The battle is in the mind.
Absolutely.
So much of our behavior is tied to our beliefs. And if I want to change your behaviors, I'm going to go after your belief system.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just behavior management. I'm going to hit pause right now in my conversation with Josh to invite you to share this episode with someone who really needs to have a more positive mindset. Now back to the conversation.
Yeah. So what I think is there's a couple things here. You triggered a thought. Number one, confidence really helps positive mindset, right? So a lot of people that come from a framework of a negative mindset usually have, again, as I alluded to earlier, that fear of failure, or they've failed often without learning and growing. However, as we build the confidence through the training and through the repetition and through fighting through and being gritty and really getting into that moment where I can overcome something and I can really come out triumphant, now we build confidence to be able to allow that person to come in with a stronger, more positive mindset. And that's when you start to shift to mastery level, right? I'll just say this too. Nobody is perfect. We never expect a perfect mindset, but mastering your mindset is really kind of moving up that curve on a scale of 1 to 10 toward that upper 8 or 9 level, right? So we're starting to move into the upper level of having our thoughts really be what drive our performance. And I'll also say that I've driven this through to my kids, right? My teenage daughters that are high thriving individuals. They know that having a positive mindset will always produce a positive outcome. And that becomes things that they do in their athletics, in their schoolwork, in their friendships, and it's really translated through multiple areas of their life. And my daughter plays softball, one of them, and she gets really frustrated when she fails because softball is a sport of failure. You're at bat 10 times, you're going to strike out or hit the ball to somebody 7 out of 10, right? So the failure rate is higher than the success rate. So when you look at things from a holistic standpoint, you have to really step back and remove expectations and think about, what are we focused on trying to drive and deliver here? Are we trying to deliver a metric that is insurmountable, or are we trying to deliver our best performance of what we can do on the day? And I also walk people through kind of this process where you have a reset button built into your mindset on a daily basis, because when you go to bed at night and you wake up, it's a fresh day. And now you get to decide, are we going to move toward a positive mindset for today? Or are we going to deal with some of the negative or the baggage we've had happen to us? And don't get me wrong, Michael, there are a lot of times where people deal with negative things that happen in their life. But I will also challenge you to think, when you have something negative happen to you, take a step back, internalize, and understand, what can I do to maybe create one positive thing that could turn that around? And what is one thing that I can do that's within my control to do so? And a lot of times there are exterior factors that may come into play, right? You may not be in control of all the variables, but I always ask, even my athletes, I say, control what you can control and let go of what you cannot, right? So again, as we work through mindset, going back to another thing you said a lot of people, it's 80%. And I would say that's very true. I tell my athletes 30% of what I do as a coach is giving you a training plan that will help you get toward the goals you are trying to accomplish from a athletic and physical standpoint. The other 70% of what we do is working on mindset and other 1% factors that are going to make a difference for you, not only on your race day, but on the journey. Because when we think about mindset, it's a big picture, right? It's beyond the daily or the weekly or the monthly. We're coming up on when people start to really think about more annually or multi-year things, that when they go through this process of working on their mindset, there's both short-term and long-term ranges of working through that, right? And truly mastering something is not something that happens overnight, as I said earlier. It's something you have to continually work on. It's something you have to go through phases of both success and failure, as well as the fun times, the bad times, the scary times, all the things, right? So there's a lot of different experience that you have to really lean into to really help work through that mastery level of trying to help your mindset.
I would presume, as I'm sitting here in your presence and learning from you and listening and even helping to fine tune some of my coaching skills, you've said a lot of really great stuff that is rooted in science and research and in just this idea that mindset is everything. Give us, as we kind of turn the corner and to get very, very practical, I'm guessing you have very specific strategies, principles, practices, tips that you can share with our viewers and listeners that will give them something very specific they can practice. Can you give us some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it really depends on the person that's trying to put this into play. But if you're just call it a new beginning in your process of mastering your mindset, right? I'd say set the small goals first and start to look at things in small bite-sized chunks that you can comprehend and handle within that scope, right? And then as you start to get more confident, right? We talked about building confidence. As you get confidence and experience, now we start to aim a little higher, and then we aim a little higher, right? So when I think about how do I help someone come up that learning curve, it's how do we find little things that start to add up to be bigger things, right? And so a lot of what we do in endurance sports is we have to really do the boring stuff before we get to the really high level performing stuff, right? And we have to know that 80% of the time we're working at a very low range of steady state before we work at the higher intensity. There's a balance there, right? So when I think about tips and tricks of how to really work on developing mindset, it's more around, set the goal for where you're at. And I also really pride myself on coaching my athletes through, we set usually 3 goals at every race, right? We set an A, B, and a C goal, right? The C goal is typically to just finish, right? We're trying to just complete the task at hand and get through that race or that event,
And
right?
that's a huge win.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the B level goal might be a more specific goal that centers around, I want to be the best in a certain portion of this race. And then the A goal would be, I want to have my absolute best day where I can truly transcend my performance and I've executed everything I had in my body for that day. And so when you set that hierarchy of goal, now you're guaranteed to succeed as long as you don't quit. Because guess what? The C goal is to complete. Then we have the B goal to kind of middle ground where we're at, right? And then we have the A goal of, wow, we're going to be our absolute best. So I would challenge the listeners or maybe ask them to think about, how can I set goals that allow me to be a little more variable in my success rate so that I don't feel like I'm failing if I hit the C goal. And I don't feel like I'm failing if I hit the B or the A goal, because as I move up the scale, now I am developing higher performance as I move through it, right? And the only thing I ask them to promise me is do not ever quit. And as long as you don't do that, now we've achieved success.
Well, and it's true. Most of us quit most of what we start. And if we just stayed the course in the various dimensions of our life, financially, physically, relationally, we would see a lot more success. But we typically give up right before it turns and right before it tips. And so that's unfortunate. And I think in many ways, Josh, what you're sharing, it's not just for athletes, but it's for anybody professionally and business and even in family. I mean, goals we set for our family and our kids and our marriages and the goals that are set within the corporate world and organizations that we serve and volunteer in. I like that idea of the hierarchy of goals. There's a lot of real wisdom there. Final word of encouragement to our listeners as we wrap up this session.
Yeah, I would say the big thing that I tell people to focus on, if I were to wrap this up, is try not to practice perfection. Just try to practice being active within this process. And you're not going to become an overnight master of your mindset unless you think of things from a long haul perspective and try to not hyper focus on today, but let's look big picture. Let's look at what can we do over time. Can we accumulate experiences that allow us to feel confident to go in and actually be more successful within how we master our mindset?
Wow. What a great conversation today, Josh. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on.
My dear friends, I cannot overstate how grateful we are here at 3 Words Podcast that you would tune in on a regular basis to engage with us in the conversations we're having here in the studio. If you want to go deeper with us, if you want to have a stronger connection with us, I'd encourage you to go to dmbcoaching.com. That's dmbcoaching.com/subscribe, where you can actually subscribe to our monthly newsletter, where we actually expand upon many of the topics we talk about here on 3 Words. All that to say, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.